I see a lot of people really excited about the Strix Halo APU that AMD put out a while ago, the Ryzen AI Max 395 Plus with the Radeon 8060S 40 compute units. It's pretty crazy powerful for an integrated graphics processor, but does it actually make any sense at all for gaming? That's what we're looking at in this video, and I have it up against a new mini PC that has just launched today. This is the MINISFORUM AtomMan G7 Pro. Now, this comes with a laptop RTX 5070. Now, this is a mini PC, although it feels like something like as if you had a laptop that didn't open up with a screen and a keyboard. It's very long and thin. You could stand it up vertically or horizontally, so it is a small, very, very small form factor design. Think laptop style. But again, it's a little different design than the mini PC I'm using for the Ryzen AI Max Plus 395 APU from AMD that has the Radeon 8060S GPU inside of it. This is from Bosgame. It's their M5 AI mini desktop PC. And so this is definitely more like a more traditional mini PC design. So it's not as long, but it is a little bit thicker than the design from the AtomMan G7 here. I received both of these as review samples. These are not sponsored in the sense that I am not being paid to advertise these. There was absolutely zero editorial control from either of these companies. Neither of them are aware of what the content of this video is, other than when they sent it to me, I said, yeah, I'll review it up against other mini PCs or desktop PCs or whatever. So, but to be clear, I didn't buy these. I did receive them as review samples. Now, one reason I'm putting these head-to-head against each other is they're at a similar-ish price point. It's not exactly the same. The AtomMan G7 Pro that's launching today is a little over $1,600 if you buy it to include RAM and an SSD. You could buy the bare bones version, which drops it to $1,359.90, but then you're left to source your own RAM and SSD. Now, maybe you already have some left over from another build, whatever. Remember, you would be using like laptop-style RAM here. If you were going to do that yourself. So basically, that's kind of the ballpark price range that we're looking at on this, whereas on the Bosgame M5, it looks like they have a couple of options available depending on how much memory you want. 96 gigabytes with a 2 terabyte SSD or 128 gigabytes with a 2 terabyte SSD. Looks like $2,000 or about $1,589, so about $1,600. So anyway, the point is that in this configuration, it's a similar-ish price. Now, the AtomMan PC certainly comes with a lot less system RAM right now, which is interesting if you're going to be using these to run AI models. And that's where I should note that I think the people who are really excited about the Ryzen AI Max Plus 395 is for AI. And this is marketed as an AI mini desktop PC. That makes sense because by using the system memory as VRAM, because it's an APU, you could then fit in very large models that don't fit into the 8 gigabytes of VRAM that are on the RTX 5070 base system. But my channel's about gaming, so when I see people talking about this kind of APU for gaming, that's kind of where this video comes in. So how does this APU from a gaming standpoint stack up against just buying a similarly priced mini PC, or this testing should also apply to laptops that are in a similar power envelope? That has a dedicated graphics processor. Again, though, keep in mind that the mobile 5070, which is what's in here, is very different than the desktop 5070. The mobile version is only 8 gigabytes, and it's just a lot slower, so that is something to keep in mind. Now, let's go ahead and get into the benchmarks. I will link both of those mini PCs in the video description. It is not an affiliate link. It is not sponsored in any way, just to be clear. And also, as we go ahead and run these benchmarks, I should also mention one more thing, which is I captured these on an external capture card on a second PC, but it looks like somehow the capture settings were set slightly differently. to the point where it seems like the Bosgame M5 has deeper black levels, or there's a bit of a black crush to it. So just mentioning that has to do with the capture settings. I was capturing on a second PC through HDMI capture so that there's no performance impact on the capturing on the two systems. But that does mean that if my capture card settings were somehow slightly different between the two, it does lead to a difference in the image presentation. So keep that in mind. Now, we're starting out here with Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Game of the Year from a lot of outlets, and one of my personal favorites at 1080p Ultra settings, native resolution. And we can see that the laptop 5070 is hitting 47 FPS in this scene, whereas the 8060S is hitting 36 FPS, only reaching 77% of the performance of that mobile 5070. Whereas, what if we wanted to hit around 60 FPS? Well, the NVIDIA 5070 supports DLSS 4. I'm not using frame generation here, to be clear. We're using the upscaling component, whereas the AMD 8060S doesn't support FSR 4. You have to rely on the older FSR upscaling, which does look more pixelated in motion, etc. So here, while the 8060S closes some of the performance gap, reaching 83% of the performance of the 5070, the image quality from DLSS 4 looks significantly more stable. Again, ignore differences in the black depths, like the contrast. That is a capturing artifact. Instead, look at things like the shimmering and things like that. Now, you don't have to use upscaling to get good performance on these. They're both pretty powerful for gaming. If you use 1080p medium settings, the 5070 can hit 70 FPS, whereas the 8060S hits 56, so reaching 80% of the performance of that mobile 5070. Again, here, this is native rendering resolution. In Clair Obscur Expedition 33, it's an Unreal Engine 5 game, so the native rendering when you don't use the DLSS or FSR pathway is using TSR, but it's set to the full 1080p resolution here. So 1080p medium settings, the 8060S is just slightly under a 60 FPS average, but the 5070 is well ahead at 70. Now, you could also use upscaling on the medium settings at 1080p. If we do that, the 5070 mobile is able to hit 87 FPS, whereas the 8060S is hitting 74 FPS, so reaching 85% of the performance of that mobile 5070. So they're both extremely playable here. However, there's also the image quality differences. Again, ignore the differences in the contrast and black levels. Instead, look at the shimmering and breakup in motion on the character and edges, the weird little sparkling issues that you get on the right-hand side of the screen. So definitely a major advantage to have DLSS 4 upscaling if you're using these for gaming. Now, what if you're on a 1440p display? Now here, I actually want to pause this for a second to emphasize it. This is actually where having the increased system RAM function as VRAM actually helps this system. The frame time graph here ends up looking more consistent, and there ends up being better 1% lows, despite the fact that the overall frame rate ends up better on the 5070 mobile. The 1% lows are worse, and there's more stuttering right at the start. The reason is, if you're playing at 1440p ultra settings, this game uses more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So the 8060S isn't slowed down by that because it was already relying on the system memory as its VRAM, and it has a huge amount of that. Whereas the 5070, once it goes over 8 gigabytes, now it has to reach into system memory. It causes some stuttering at the start, and we can see very low 1% lows. That being said, it does smooth out partway through the benchmark run, so it was really on the initial start where that caused problems, and the average FPS is still higher for the 5070 mobile at 31 FPS versus 24 on the 8060S. However, all of that seems kind of academic because that's kind of low frame rates. I think I would at least use upscaling if not turn down the settings. So if we leave it at ultra settings, but then use upscaling, DLSS 4 on the balanced setting on a 1440p output looks excellent. Whereas FSR 3 at the balanced setting on a 1440p output, I mean, you can do it, you can use it, but like there's noticeably less detail. There's a lot more fizzling and blurring in motion, a lot more shimmering on edges, poor, anti-aliasing treatments, etc. So much better image quality on the left, and we're hitting the higher frame rate with the 54 FPS compared to 43. So the 8060S is reaching only 80% of the performance and significantly worse image quality. What if we stay at native 1440p though, but just turn down settings? If we go down to medium settings, but native 1440p, again using TSR at 100% resolution scale for Unreal Engine 5, the 5070M hits, now I'm calling it the 5070M for 5070 mobile, although NVIDIA doesn't do the M at the end anymore like they used to on the current generations, but emphasizing this is not a desktop 5070, completely different type of GPU. Anyway, we're hitting 50 FPS versus 37 on the 8060S, so the 8060S is only hitting 74% of the performance of the 5070M. So they're both, doing the native resolution. You could play it on both of them, but it's a much better experience on the 5070. However, I would probably still use upscaling, especially on the 5070, where DLSS 4 balanced on the medium preset gets you up to 76 frames per second. Whereas the 8060S hits 63, which is over a 60 FPS average. It's very playable in a big Unreal Engine 5 game. But again, FSR 3 balanced does not look anywhere near as good as DLSS 4 balanced. So not only are you hitting a lower overall frame rate, you're also getting significantly worse image quality, worse anti-aliasing, more disocclusion artifacts, etc. So that's a real major difference when using these for gaming that I really think you would want to consider. And it's one of my problems with AMD's APUs in general. Now, I did also want to test out some other games. For example, Marvel Rivals at 1080p medium has a built-in benchmark tool that we can use to get some comparison in more of a competitive game and medium settings. Here we can see the 5070 hits 111 FPS, whereas the 8060S hits 91. They're both giving you a really good experience at 1080p medium settings, but the 8060S is only reaching 82% of the performance of the 5070 mobile version. By the way, the frame rate number here is not from the entire benchmark run. I killed it right there at the end of that initial sequence. Now, if we also use upscaling to push frame rates even further, DLSS 4 quality on a 1080p output doesn't look bad. FSR 3 quality, again, I'm not here for the image quality in a competitive game, but like I can see a lot more breakup and pixelation in motion. Just doesn't look as nice. It's 139 FPS for the 5070 laptop version and 115 FPS for the 8060S. They're both very playable, but it's only 83% of the performance of the 5070 when you're using the AMD APU. Now, at 1440p native resolution, medium settings, we're seeing the 5070 hit 77 FPS average, so still very, very playable. And the 8060S, 59 FPS average, so only slightly under 60. It's still a very usable experience, but it's only reaching 77% of the performance of that laptop 5070. Also, it is a it's a competitive game, so you're going to be wanting to hit high frame rates for a competitive edge, which is also why I'm going to test out using DLSS and FSR. DLSS 4 balanced, again, I'm not using frame generation here, so this is actual performance increase, not generated frames. Getting 120 FPS now on that mobile 5070, and the AMD APU is hitting 95 FPS, extremely playable. But again, when you look at the image quality of the footage, on the characters in motion, you see a lot of pixelation and breakup on the right-hand side of the screen that looks significantly better on the left-hand side of the screen. So keep that in mind. Another thing I wanted to mention is that, well, I wouldn't necessarily consider either of these a ray tracing powerhouse. And trying to use something like Cyberpunk's RT Overdrive mode is a bit of a stretch even for the 5070 laptop version. That being said, if you're on a 1080p display, using quality DLSS 4 upscaling looks pretty good, and using ray reconstruction helps out. Again, there's no frame generation here. And that does reach a 49 FPS average for the laptop 5070 on the built-in benchmark. Now, that's not amazing frame rates, but it is a single player game. You might kick on ×2 frame gen from here, and for a mobile based system or a mini PC, you know, if you want to do path tracing, it's certainly a decision you could make, even if it's not ideal. Whereas the 8060S is well under 30 FPS. It's only hitting 24 frames per second, and the image quality is significantly worse with no ray regeneration and no FSR4 upscaling. Now, keep in mind, if you just want to play Cyberpunk at high frame rates, you can use medium settings at 1080p and hit high frame rates on both systems at native resolution. 139 FPS average on the laptop 5070 in the built-in benchmark run. Again, ignore the differences in the black levels on the two captures. That's a capture issue, not a difference between AMD and NVIDIA or anything like that. And the 8060S here is hitting 117 frames per second. So 84% of the performance of that laptop 5070. So again, both of them are very, very usable for gaming in Cyberpunk. But again, that 5070 mobile is certainly putting in some extra work. And also, I do want to emphasize that, like, well, Cyberpunk looks great with all the path tracing and turned on and all that. It still looks pretty respectable on medium settings, and you can get a very nice high refresh rate experience at native resolution on both of these. So you can definitely play the game and have a good time. Now, I did also want to test out 1440p here. I did try out the RT Overdrive path tracing mode. DLSS 4 balanced can get the 5070 laptop version up to 37 frames per second. Again, that's without any frame gen turned on, but with balance level upscaling. The 8060S is under 20 FPS, averaging 18 frames per second by the end of the benchmark run, reaching less than half of the performance of the 5070 laptop. And while also having less performance, it's also offering worse image quality. If you look at the reflections right now, ray reconstruction's helping out a lot on the left-hand side of the screen. And just the overall look on the right-hand side is very pixelated. Again, ignore the difference in contrast. We're getting a lot more detailed with the balance level DLSS 4 versus balance level FSR 3. I really wish AMD would put a more updated, like RDNA 4 based APU out there. That would be really nice for gaming. I guess they're probably waiting for RDNA 5 or something like that, but it's annoying to have to rely on the FSR 3 upscaling for gaming here. But again, though, if you were playing on 1440p, that was pretty low frame rates on both. Like, sure, you could get path tracing up and running on the 5070 mobile, but if you'd rather play the game at high refresh rates, high responsiveness, then 1440p native resolution runs just fine at medium settings, still looks very nice, and we're hitting 94 frames per second on the 5070 mobile version. The 8060S, on the other hand, is hitting 77, which is also very, very playable. It's really impressive how far APUs have come. So don't get me wrong, the fact that there is integrated graphics out there from AMD that is hitting these kinds of frame rates in Cyberpunk at native 1440p resolution, sure, medium settings, but they still look pretty good. 77 FPS, pretty impressive. 94 is better. We're reaching 82% of the performance, and again, that's without relying on any kind of FSR or DLSS upscaling, but also no ray tracing turned on. So, what if you did use upscaling, since even though we're not using ray tracing, you could still use it to boost frame rates. Again, no frame generation in this test. DLSS 4 balanced on a 1440p output, I think, still does an excellent job. Look at the bottles in the back of the bar right now. They stay together pretty well on the left-hand side. They're pretty pixelated and shimmery on the right. So again, FSR 3 balanced kind of puts a damper on things compared to DLSS 4. That being said, the overall frame rates here, if that's what you're looking for, very, very good on both. The integrated graphics hitting 116 FPS here is quite impressive, although that's only 87% of the performance of the 5070 mobile-based system, which is hitting 134 frames per second. Again, if you look at like palm tree branches, the fans in the background, the characters in the distance, the foliage, things are just looking a lot more put together on that left-hand side of the screen with the DLSS upscaling. So I think this is enough benchmarks. Sure, I could have done more games, but you're gonna see a lot more of the same. So what's my overall thought here? So the Bosgame M5 is impressive mobile graphics here with that 40 compute unit Strix Halo from AMD. It's really cool to see how far you can push integrated graphics. But I think the main selling point on something like this is going to be for AI workloads where you can access the system RAM as VRAM to run huge models. Whereas in gaming, a actual discrete GPU, especially when you're getting the NVIDIA option that offers the DLSS 4 upscaling, whereas AMD's APUs are still stuck without FSR 4 support. I think for gaming purposes, it makes a lot more sense to get something like this. Now, we did see that in situations where you spill over the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, like at 1440p ultra settings, that occasionally there can be instances where it helps out in the 1% lows and frame times to be on this system with a huge amount dedicated to VRAM. But anyway, that's what I've got for you guys today. I do think both of these were really interesting systems. I think they both have their place. But do keep in mind what you're buying it for. Also, I plan on doing an upcoming video. I've completed some of the testing for it, just to remind people that a 5070 mobile, the laptop version, even if NVIDIA still just calls it an RTX 5070, it is very much not a desktop RTX 5070, which has more VRAM and significantly more performance. So expect a video coming out soon where I do emphasize that side of the story. So with these mini PCs, they're certainly interesting if that's the form factor that you're looking for, and I think both of these were good quality examples of these types of systems, but just make sure you know what you're buying. Where the AI Max Plus 395, I'm personally interested more in the handheld space, although those handhelds are a little ridiculous, and I think I might hold off and see if AMD puts out a APU with actual FSR 4 upscaling support next generation before I upgrade on my Steam Deck. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. I will have links to both of these systems. They're not sponsored or affiliate links. And again, I did receive these as review samples, but these companies were not controlling the narrative here and aren't even aware of what I'm saying in this video until you are. So just keep that in mind. I hope everybody has an excellent day.